Well, hello everybody. Hello and welcome to this tour in the Indigenous and Canadian galleries at National Gallery of Canada this afternoon for about 40 minutes. I'm very happy to virtually meet you today. My name is Anne-Marie and I work in the education programming here at the gallery, education department. And I'm very happy we'll go through the galleries together to discover the work of about 4 or 5 artists, part of this collection of the gallery. And all these artists have in common to be women. So we wanted to do this tour today to celebrate one specific holiday, I should say. I was about to say celebration, birthday, but a day. For Mother's Day, actually, we want to do that. So for all the mothers right now who are watching us, wherever you are, we want to wish you a wonderful Mother's Day for tomorrow, or Mother's Weekend. Maybe we shall say this tour for everybody, but especially for all of you. So thank you for joining in. So, like I said, my name is Anne-Marie. I'll be with you throughout these 40 minutes. But I am not alone. I am with my 2 colleagues, Hélène, that you might know already because she's been doing those tours and monitoring like that the tour, so you know her. She's also with somebody else, Laurence, who's here as well to make sure everything goes smoothly for our tour. So as we go smoothly throughout the galleries to discover 4 or 5 artworks, please feel free to comment or ask some questions. We can't promise, of course, to take everything, but here and there, if we have questions regarding the works we're discussing, we're more than happy to answer your question. And this is why, as well, Hélène is here to translate or vocify your question. So for this tour, we chose to present you some artworks, part of Canadian and Indigenous galleries. We could have chose to go upstairs in the European galleries or somewhere else, but one of the reasons why we wanted to come in these galleries and do a tour and to show you these artworks is because there's 2017 marked the 150th anniversary of the Confederation, and one initiative of the gallery was to rethink how we present art that has been created on the land of Canada. So there was this effort to create a better, a more present conversation, dialogue between Canadian artworks and Indigenous voices, Indigenous artworks from the collection, but also to highlight the work of Canadian and Indigenous women artists in Canada. So we'll go around the galleries, we'll walk slowly, we'll give you some time to look at the painting as well. And I really want to start this tour today with the work of Prudence Heward here. So give you maybe a few seconds to look at this painting called Letendre. This painting has been created in 1929. And Prudence Heward was from Montreal. So she traveled in Europe, throughout Canada as well, but she was born in Montreal, and she stayed in Montreal for a while. And she was associated with the group the Beaver Halls. But even though Letendre was painted in the late 1920s, 1929, something might come to mind to us. So you might remember last Saturday, our colleague Marcelle gave a wonderful tour about the group of 7. So we were in these galleries a little bit further away to discover the work of a group of 7. And they thrived in the 1920s, 1930s. And it's exactly the same period that Prudence Heward was creating some art, doing painting. She exhibited with the group of 7, with some members of the group of 7, but she never simply painted or was mainly interested in painting nature and the land. Even though in many of her paintings, and also with this one, with Letendre, we have a sense of the land, she was celebrating figures, people, personalities, and identities. So she never quit to paint people, and not everybody around her. She mainly painted women and children. So Hélène here with her beautiful pink smock and the farm behind her gives us little tips about what she does. She's a farmer. So I invite Hélène to come. J'allais dire Morel. I was about to say Morel, but she's not here. It's Hélène today. To come just a little bit closer to focus on her face, her facial features. Prudence Heward was known for developing a certain relationship with her models. She was talking to them, and it was clearly important for Prudence Heward to showcase the model who she is, what kind of personality she has. She wanted to show these women in a very controlled way, in a very solid and strong way, as much as possible. So look at her eyes. They are almost looking at us, maybe just a little, the sight is a little bit shifted, but she's still confronting us. She has this little 1920s inspired little bob haircut. She has this beautiful smock. Her hands are holding her body in a very solid way. She's holding her hips, and she's in the middle of the painting. She is really, really present, but yet always in control of her body, of her emotion. And that was very important for Prudence Heward to do that. And that also marked her intervention into art history. So a lot of us know if we walk through different galleries, different collection, different art from Renaissance, we are used to see women painted slightly in a different way. Not always the same way, but one thing that is recurrent, we often painted women in a very smiley way, if I can say that. They were smiling or in a seducing or seductive pose. It's not what's going on here. For Prudence Heward, it's quite important to show women as real women, as who they are, with their strength. So this is one thing really important here that really distinct her ce qu'elle a apporté, so what Prudence Heward brought to art history. She wants to show women strongly and as they are. Another thing that is important in this painting is the setup, where the location that we can find Roland in. So if you look right behind her, behind Roland, you will notice the farm. I think we said a few words about this building a few minutes ago. So this is a farm. You'll notice there's not much details. It's very schematized, very pastel colors. It's behind her, and the farm, the building, frames her head. It's in the background. In the foreground, well, we have Roland. She's right there. We just talked about her. She's very present in the middle. But in between the farm, far away, in the background, and Roland, who is in the foreground, you will find in between them the fence, a fence that is almost like these abstract lines that separates her and the farm. So one interesting question we could ask ourselves when we look at this painting from 1929, Roland by Prudence Heward, is the fence there to protect the land? And is Roland in front of the building of the land and the fence because she's the guardian angel? She's the patron, the boss of the place. We could have this conclusion, but we can also think or interpret the fact that she's in front of the building, she's outside the fence and ready to leave, to walk out, or to walk towards another land, a different future. So I give you a few more seconds to look at this, and maybe there are some questions or comments about this painting.
There are no questions so far, but I have seen some comments. MB Melisa has written, I always wondered why her gaze is lowered instead of directed at us. And someone else commented, Karen Kabarli commented, her gaze is inward.
Inward, I like that. Yes, so inward, like she's reflecting on herself. And one thing that we discussed is the fact that she's strong. It's maybe a way to hold herself up and focus on her inner self as well. That's interesting.
So I'm just getting closer to the painting so you folks can kind of see the details, brushstrokes, the surface of the painting itself. And maybe by getting closer you also see the colors a bit more realistically. Here's a bit of a reflection of the light.
There's also a lot of good comments on her pink apron, how it's not sitting on her shoulders very neatly, how it's kind of loose fitting.
Yeah, one thing about that, the clothes, that it's not perfectly sit on her, the fact that, the position is, she could be moving after that, or she was doing something before that. Just these little detail shows that Prudence Heward was not trying to beautify or idealize women, something that we know happened in different artworks and throughout history. It's not what's going on here. So that's interesting to apply this knowledge or this comment to the clothes itself.
Just to go a little
Yes.
further into the apron, Very Beautiful asks, why the pink robe over Heward? Is it to represent femininity? And you kind of talked about that a little bit.
What I know about the pink apron, it was a very typical apron from Ile d'Orléans for farmers. So from what I know about the pink of the apron, it's more the will of Prudence Heward to show the actual suit of women farmers. So without saying it's documentary, it's being loyal to the suit itself.
Right.
But it's interesting as well to take it again and talk about pink and femininity. I think Laurence has a question.
Well, not a question, just a little side note that basically you can see two outfits. Basically, you have the black one and you have the apron on top. And basically, the black outfit is a school outfit because she was not just a farmer, but she was attending school as well. And then the pink apron was something that you would put on to go work in the field, to go work on the farm. So that's why the outfit is the way it is as well.
So there's a double identity
Yeah.
here. Double identity. Very interesting.
She's already a dynamic character, very assertive in comparison to more passive representations of women.
Yeah.
These are all great comments.
And I dare to compare this painting to any CEO portrait, contemporary portrait of CEOs. There's something very similar in terms of strength, body language, facial expression as well. There's something of that. Shall we move?
We will show continue.
Yeah, take a look at the cartel and then move on to Emily Carr.
Okay. And we'll move on.
Let's move on.
I'm wearing pink pants. I would say it's a power color.
Yes, in the French Tour we talk about that, how Mylan today dressed up in very beautiful pop colors that we'll see throughout the tour. Very good. Okay, so if we want to do a tour in these galleries and celebrate the work of women artists, Emily Carr is an important stop for us today. So I welcome, I almost said the title of the painting, which I didn't want to say yet, but we are in front of this beautiful painting called, I'll say it now, The Welcome Man, painting from 1913. So if with Prudence Heward, we were in Quebec, in the Eastern Canada, in 1929, we go back in time, 1913s. I'll move a little bit because I want to make sure Manon is doing a great job just to make sure I'm into the frame and you just don't see my hands.
Yeah, no, it's good.
That's good. Okay, perfect. So we are in 1913 in the Western Canada, so British Columbia, with Emily Carr. As I'll say a few words about it, I invite Mylan to come closer to show you the richness of the colors in this painting. What we see a figure. We see the welcome man. It's a totem pole from Kwakwaka'wakw territory, welcoming people for potluck. But we see that figure in the shadow. But please notice the colors of the shadow. There are rich blues, purple, some red in there that are juxtaposed with the landscape background that is clearly lit with this beautiful evening time colors, evening time lighting. It's really rich in terms of yellows, green, and lavender as well. So focus on the colors, but as well the brushstrokes that are quite present, quite textured, and we can feel them. Emily Carr and Prudence Heward had something in common. They were both brought up in a Victorian era. They were from a British heritage. But very early in their life, they wanted to become artists. And Emily Carr, one thing she did quite early in her life is to leave Canada, leave her Victorian home and culture to travel throughout Europe, London and Paris, where she discovered modernist. Oh, I'll try to say that in English correctly. Modernist movement? Mm-hmm. Modernism? Modern. I had it, of course I had it. Modernist movements such as all the post-impressionist painters, Harry Gibbs, and the Fauvists as well. These painters that were quite interested in interpret their landscape, their life, by experimenting with colors. So she discovered all this new relationship to colors and to painting and representation while working with her sister Alice in Europe, in Paris and London. So she experimented very much in terms of representation. And all of this baggage, all of these experiment with color, light, she brought it back to Canada with her. A lot of painters from Canada or even North America were going to Europe. They could easily stay there, but she came back. And in 1912, something kind of changed her mindset, for at least she received this awakening in a way about the Canadian land in a trip she took on Vancouver Island, specifically in Alert Bay, where she was doing these sketching trip and where she discovered different indigenous cultures in the Western Canada. She was fascinated with those cultures that she didn't know quite well. So to observe this culture, to try to immerse herself in this culture and try to draw what she sees and then bring back those sketches into a studio and paint was a way for her to connect with culture she didn't know before, and she was trying to connect with those cultures. She was doing those sketches and painting on Kwakwaka'wakw territory in the Western Canada. So I'm sorry if I repeat that, I just want to make sure I said it. Contrary to some of her predecessor artists and painters from Canada, she was quite aware of her own identity as well. Being Canadian, being from European heritage as well, she was actively trying to not apply this, I'll repeat the same word as before, this idealization, this beautification, this objectification of indigenous culture. She was trying to do that very much. So a lot of her painting here in this gallery represent indigenous cultures, forest as well. But just for today, we wanted to focus on this beautiful painting, The Welcome Man. And I think I had another thing to say regarding the brushstroke, but I think we talked about that. But one thing I want us to keep in mind, especially for Émilie Carr in the regard of our tour, is her fusion between the observation from her homeland, from different cultures she was in contact with, the Western Canada. She was painting what she saw, what she was interested in, her curiosities, with modernist flair to them. And she was one of the first ones who brought modernism in that way in Canada, in her circle of artists.
So we haven't received any questions so far, but we did receive one comment I think you might appreciate, Anne-Marie, from Karen Lou. She says, or they say, this tour is the best Mother's Day present. Thank you.
Oh, good. I'm happy you enjoy very much. In the French tour earlier at one, Mylan, we discussed the brushstroke, how apparent they are, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to just go back to this comment right now, how it's present, how we can almost feel the painter that painted and applied the paint on the image itself. This itself is a modern approach to painting. Mm-hmm. For a long time, painting in artistry, a lot of painters wanted to make almost like a window open to the world. We don't see the intervention or the hand of the artist. We want to see the picture. But now things are changing and we wanted to see that. There's some experiment regarding the brushstroke and the textures with the paint. That is a material, that is a language. And I say that now because we talked about that, but we'll also come back to this idea very soon. I think there's a question.
We have 3 questions. Just talking about materials in painting, Magnetica Namoli asks, is it oil paint?
It's oil paint, I think, on cardboard. Oil paint on cardboard.
So oil paint on cardboard. And then we have 2 questions here from Jeffrey T. Boone. Do we know exactly where the painting was made? What village?
It's Allard Bay, but the sketches were made while in the trip in Allard Bay. But then she came back in her studio. I believe it's Vancouver, but I might be wrong. But she didn't paint this painting on the land where she drew this in Allard Bay. She came back in her studio, which I say that with some reserve, Vancouver, but she went back. And so there's this idea of transfer. Doing a sketch based on vision, based on consuming reality, based also on subjectivity of the artist who look at things and look at their environment. There's a sketch, and then later on, maybe a few days, few weeks, few months, who knows, from that sketch, in that case, the artist did the painting, the final painting that we see here.
So it's not Vancouver, but Victoria. Karen Cabarly has told us Victoria.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Karen.
Victoria,
Yes.
exactly. Yes.
I get them confused.
It's both V's. So.
I'll get
All right.
closer to the.
Yeah.
Those are all the questions that we have.
Wonderful. So I'll give you a moment to look at the panel. Emily Carr, The Welcome Man, 1913.
There we go. So they asked what the figure is. It's the welcome men. There we go. All right, continue.
So with the rhythm of our shoes, we lead you to a different world. We were in the early 20th century. Now we're traveling to the second half of the 20th century to explore something a little bit different.
Something very different.
I should have led with very different. I think you're right. I think that's good. That's good.
Well, I think our viewers will see why it's so different. And actually, could you step in the frame so that way we can see just the scale of it? There we go. That's good.
I'm 5'1", so it gives you a sense of scale. And I like that you lead with that, with the idea of scale, because we are standing in front of Marcelle Ferron, consonant in French, but let me just read it in English to make sure I say that correctly. A Sibyllin consonant. Marcelle Ferron, Sibyllin consonant, a painting created in 1961. Scale, right? I'm tiny. The painting is very large. It's very present. It's very bold. And Marcelle Ferron, in a period where in Quebec and in Europe, a lot of trends were about doing. All good? Again, I just want to make sure I'm in the right frame here. A lot of painters were doing small artworks, and I'm excluding New York City. That's different. But it was a trend about doing small work. But with Marcelle Ferron, it's the opposite, very large work. In a period as well, when she did this, she was in Paris, and I'll talk a bit more about the location in a few minutes. The evacuating colors was also a little bit fashion, but she was embracing color, she was embracing movement, she was embracing marks as well in her painting, and she was quite celebrated for that. If you come a little bit closer, I invite you to look at the color blend, the color blending, the color gradient in there. It's very rich, it's really colorful, for lack of a better word right now. It's very textured. One of the questions we get a lot here as interpreters, as educators, is why abstract art is art? Oh, I feel I could have done that. Why is it so special? And these questions are all fair enough. We can ask, of course, this question, but I think one good advice we can share with viewers, it's simply to take time to stand in front of the painting and let yourself be soaked by what you see, and let yourself be immersed in that experience, and to stay simply aware of your own visual, bodily, intellectual experience of the painting. You might be surprised with what comes out of it. So to go back to the idea of colors and the gradient, all the mixing of colors here, I'm sure you had this experience, you were close enough to see how rich it is. Marcelle Ferron was quite known as well as a wonderful artist, someone who knows well about composition, about colors, but she was a wonderful pigment maker as well. Using different pigments and poppy seed oil, she was able to create a very, very specific and unique hues of purple, blue, and yellow as well. So there's something very artistic, of course, about this painting, but I think it's interesting to shift the focus on the chemical aspect or the technical aspect of some of the pigment and colors, just to highlight the fact that making art is also a question of cleverness, of mastering something quite hard to master when you're not part of this world as well. And abstract art like that, you can feel the texture, I hope, through the
We've
digital
had a few
screen.
comments. Yeah, we've had some
Yes.
comments on the texture and how it looks like industrial paint, maybe.
She was, Marcelle Ferron, yes, she was painting with different kind of pigment, but she wasn't shy as well, or wouldn't hesitate to paint with Carr paint, or with all kind of painting that could exist outside the artistic world as well, to create something unique like that. So it's interesting to comment about, could it be industrial paint, could it be? In that case here, it's oil on canvas, but in this era, and with Marcelle Ferron as well, it could have been possible to see on the canvas a different type of more industrial paint, for sure. Marcelle Ferron, she's one of the, and I'm very French, so I might ask for my wonderful colleague for a good translation for the word signataire.
Signature?
Yeah, person who signed.
Yeah, she signed the manifesto.
She knows where I'm going. That's good, that's perfect, yes. She was one of the artists and thinker who signed the Refus Global, so the global refusal. So this manifest written by Paul-Émile Bourgeois, we have some painting around us by Paul-Émile Bourgeois, in 1948. A wonderful, beautiful text that tried to highlight the need for artists to be free, to celebrate their freedom, to celebrate their imagination, to celebrate their subconsciousness as well, to free themselves from what they know and what rules them in the everyday life, to really be themselves, be the artists they should be, and create something unique in art. So with Marcelle Ferron, different painter we have in the room right now that you might know, Jean-Paul Riopel and Paul-Émile Bourgeois, they were celebrating this spontaneity of paint, the artists who paint quickly, rapidement, and with a lot of movement. So what you're looking at right now is not an automatist painting per se, it's an evolution from that. But from that comment, I want to highlight the fact that we can feel the movement, we can feel the intervention by the artist. And one last thing, the tools that she used to make this painting. Clearly, it's quite obvious she didn't use a paintbrush. The artist reinvented the tool as well. She used different kind of truelle, different palette knives as well to spread those colors in those paint, to make unique marks on them as well. Marcelle Ferron, just like different artists in Quebec from the 1940s and 50s, left Montreal, left Quebec to go live somewhere else where art was way more advanced, I put that in bracket, more modern as well. So she went in Paris from 1953 to 1966 for a period of 13 years. This painting from 1961 has been painted in Paris. And she was there. She went in Paris, of course, to become an artist and to push her art, but she did that with her $3 as well. So she's one of those rare artists of the period who embrace the family life, being a mother, and also not compromising her art. Something for Mother's Day I want to highlight.
Definitely.
Are there any more questions or comments before we move on?
No more questions. Just a few comments about the tools and everything, but like we explained, it wasn't done with a paintbrush. It was done with a palette.
Different palette knives could be very large.
Yes. Okay. There is one comment. There is an action and force in those strokes, and I would agree with you, Mocha Niche. Definitely see that gesture come through. Thank you for all the comments. Okay.
We talk about gesture and movement, and we can feel that. We're going to see a different abstract painting with a different vibe to it.
A different sort of energy.
Yeah, different. Oh, and that's the color. You know why?
Here's the panel text for you folks in case you might have missed the introduction. So that's the name of the artist, Marcelle Ferron. The title there, Sibilant Consonants, 1961. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci.
Alors, on va passer dans les salles. Ouais. Pendant qu'on marche, I'm speaking French here.
It's okay. We're a bilingual institution.
There you go. And sometimes we go back and forth to forget which language we discuss. Now, switch back to English. Next week, we'll have another tour.
We will be looking at flowers and art en français at 13h and in English at 3 p.m. also on Saturday. So we'll be looking at flowers in art, and it will be with me.
With Mylan. She'll be in front of the camera.
Oh gosh.
She's fabulous. She's fabulous. So.
Thank you. You can get a little closer.
Okay, well,
Very good.
I'm frame?
Yes.
Not good?
You're in the
All right, very good. Rita Letendre. Again, painter from Quebec. Drummondville, to be Drummondville. It's a Drummondville. Rita Letendre also jumped headfirst into the world of abstract art. But I wanted to show you this beautiful painting because it's abstract, it's way more geometric than Marcelle Ferron's work. And it's also a bit more, I don't want to say a bit more transcending, but it's transcending in a different way. If you come closer, you will notice the brush strokes are not present. There's almost no texture. We feel the texture of the canvas itself. It's acrylic on canvas here. Just gonna move. But we almost don't feel the physical presence of the person who made this, of Rita Letendre, who created this in 1975, and the title is Shisakan. So please focus on the colors, on the agency of the colors.
Agency,
The
strength, or
I want to say just the color combination goes in here. We have dark browns with very pop or saturated blues, and the beautiful yellows and greens in the middle. In order to know a bit more about Rita Letendre's relation with abstract art, I listened to some interviews she gave in the last few years, and one thing struck me when she talked about abstraction itself. She was saying how much she loved the painters of the work of Renaissance great masters, such as Leonardo da Vinci, for instance, or even closer to us, Van Gogh. She said her artworks are great. We see flowers, landscape, or people. Bottom line, figuration is great. So she likes that. But for her, to do figuration, which in a different way means creating a painting in which we clearly identify something clear, such as a person or a landscape, and so on. This subject matter can be a distraction to the actual essence of the painting. So when we hear this comment or this principle about painting, making abstract art for Rita Letendre becomes a way to speak directly to us, to create energy, to work with colors, maybe texture, or a sense of space as well. Just to play with little elements are enough for her to speak to us directly. Again, I said that regarding the work of Marcelle Ferron. When you don't know what to do with abstract painting, if you don't know how to engage with it, just stand in front of it and let it speak to you. Let yourself feel something. It could be anything, and see where it leads you. A little bit earlier on, I asked the audience in the French tour and with Mylan and Laurence, I said, are you able to identify something, or do you get a sense of something when you're looking at this? Even though it's very abstract and geometric as well. I think to that question some people can comment right now, but one thing that was recurrent was this sense of space. We feel we could go very, very far in the painting, this sense of depth, but it's not a space per se, but we have the sense of depth. We have a sense of light, luminous as well. Maybe it's one of the reasons we brought up this idea of color combination as well. We have this very strong, bold yellow that comes out of it. These things are enough for the artist to make us feel something very, very specific that is not from the order of the cognitive reading, the intellectual interpretation we can have from a work, but it derives more of a biological and emotional relationship to what we see. Rita Letendre was born in Quebec, and she has Abenaki heritage. And from the mid-30s, mid-30s, and early 40s, it was a period in her life where she wanted to know more and connect more with the Abenaki heritage. And doing painting and aesthetic like that was a way to connect as well with her Abenaki heritage as well. And this is an idea that a lot of us can relate to, using art in order to connect with ourselves, with others, with some ideas as well.
There were some really great comments. No questions so far, but we had talked about light in the last tour, and someone mentioned speed. Another person mentioned a road leading far and fast.
Yes.
Journey. Some other keywords are sharpness and smoothness.
Yes.
And the most recent comment is from Curler48. Says, "Feel like it's a curtain beginning to part. What could be behind it?"
A curtain that
beginning to
oh
part.
yeah. Yeah, especially with the black, that gives a sense of it's far
Exactly.
away. There's something behind. Yeah.
Or could the curtains maybe be closing in?
Oh. Sense of movement. There you go. There you go.
If you folks have any questions or other comments, please leave them below. We'll be posting the video on our Instagram page, so you can, if you've missed the beginning, you can also catch that later. We'll be posting that later tomorrow, probably. Tomorrow or Monday.
To come.
To come.
Still to come.
Still to come.
All right, let's move on
We'll
to
move on.
conclude. Oh yes, take your time. Go closer to the painting and the panel. And
So
we'll conclude.
we'll notice the panel is in English here, in French, and then we also have another language here. There we go. So in case you missed the introduction, that is her name, Rita Letendre. Shisa Khan is the name of the artwork, and it was made in 1975.
Okay. And off to our last piece.
The last piece, yes. The last artwork of the day, which I think will be a good summary of a lot of things we discussed together today. Joyce Wieland, Content Spread, 1967. So now I just don't want to say anything to give you the pleasure to come closer and see this artwork.
I'm just going to show you folks, we're in a side gallery, so I can't get the full artwork in the frame, so it'll be slightly on an angle. I'm going to get a little bit closer so you folks can see the materials.
So again, Joyce Wieland, Content Spread, 1967. This artwork, it's on the wall, it's very bold colors, there's line, it's very geometric, so at first glance, it seems like an abstract painting, but as we get closer to it, we realize that, wait a minute, it's not a 2D artwork, it's 3D. We're in between this pictorial image and this sculpture as well, because what you're looking at right now is a tall piece. The artist created this with pieces of fabric of de la ouate, and I think I need my colleague here to help me translate what.
Cotton.
Cotton? Cotton, yeah. Okay, some cotton and plastic. So it's little bag and pockets, different colors containing all of that. You will notice the leaf. Oh, Canada leaf?
Maple leaf.
The maple leaf, there you go.
Canada flag.
And Canada flags everywhere. These pieces of fabric, of tiny Canadian flag, all put together, all sewed back together, have the sense of a quilt, which in itself echoes the Canadian flag here. So this, what you're looking at, is an interpretation of the Canadian flag, as we know it, by the artist Joyce Wieland. It's been created in 1967, so it rings a bell, 1967. It's the 100th anniversary of the Confederation. So she created that to mark, I don't want to say to celebrate, but to mark this 100th anniversary. And she takes this opportunity when she created this to question what is Canada nationalism, what is Canadian identity. And this question, I think and I see and I hope this question transforms with time. We're 50 years after that, so our questions are different. But when we go back to the spirit of the 1967, 50 years ago, she wants to include in this idea of Canada the work and the presence of women as well. So I bring you back to how this piece was made. It's a quilt that has been considered low art for many times, work associated with women, work that was not necessarily elevated as art. Joyce Wieland here says no. Let's bring women in the center of the question of Canadian identity, but also she wants to elevate women and the work typically associated with femininity or with women at the level of art here. And one thing that I absolutely personally adore here are the colors. It's so bright and neon. It's full of colors, first of all, but look at these beautiful bright orange here, this corail color, this bright green. It's very, very, this pink as well on the flag. The whites, the blues, the yellows, it's very colorful. And it's reminiscent as well of pop art. We are in the middle of the 1960s here. Pop art is quite predominant in United States, in New York, where she lived for a long time. She did that while she was in New York as well. So she's inspired as well by the aesthetic of her time, by the aesthetic of American art and different art thoughts around the world as well, in Western art. Conceptual art as well is, for lack of, for actually the best word brought into this piece. Conceptual art is precisely there. And one thing I could say before answering some questions that you might have, she created this piece, like I said, in 1967. We know the context, but it's been part of a show called True Patriotic Love, curated by National Gallery of Canada in 1971, so right a few years after that, after creating this piece. And it was the first solo show given to a woman still alive.
Living female.
Living female, thank you, Mylan, for that. So I wanted to highlight that for sure. So Joyce Wieland, by this piece, we have a few pieces around in different collections as well. We have a few. She's one of the pioneer artists who really wanted to open the voices of contemporary art in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. On that note, there might be some questions, comments.
We do. We have some questions and comments, and you got to one of them. One of the comments was from C. Davidson, curator, just mentioning that in 1971, the National Gallery had made that solo exhibition for the first living female artist. Well, not the first, sorry. It was the first exhibition for the, yeah, exactly. So thank you for your comments and adding that. And then we do have some questions. We have one from Quell Monique. Did she always use these types of materials in her work? That's one question. So I'll let you answer that, and then we have a couple more after that.
She did a lot of painting in the most with the traditional material, I shall say. We have different abstract paint, so using canvas, paint, and paintbrush. But she did different flags like that with all kinds of material, and she worked with many assemblage pieces. Mm-hmm. So, I don't want to go to history here, but she could easily use different mugs, things like that around her, found objects to reinterpret them and to make a work of art with that. So I don't think she was limited with the conventions of material. She was inventive about that, like other artists on the time as well. So this is not a unique approach. I think it reflects her imaginative use of materials. I think there was another question, but I forget.
There is another question, but it's from someone else. It's from Hal Suitas. And their question says, perhaps representing diversity in Canada. So I think, if I'm translating the question properly, I think the different parts being sewn together is meant to represent the diversity in Canada?
Yes. Thank you very much for pointing this out. It's easy to forget things here and there when we give a tour, but I think that is central as well. The idea of quilt, of course, reflect work associated with women and craft, that's for sure, but the idea of quilt as well is take different pieces and put them together. So yes, it does echo diversity in Canada. She was interested in that, and she was awakened by that by living in the United States, in New York as well. She was quite aware of racial injustice in New York, but when she comes back, she has this in Canada. She also thinks actively about different communities in Canada and how they cohabitate, how they are treated. So yes, to make a piece like that is to highlight that Canada can be this optimistic optimistic land where people can be as they are, for sure, and including. That's the word I was looking for. So thanks for pointing this out.
That's a great question. I have a couple other questions. Well, I have a question myself, but then I noticed someone else asked a very similar question, so I'll just kind of hop onto this. D. Camrick is asking, is conservation a problem with the plastic? Do you know anything about that? Do we have any conservators watching? I hope that we have conservators.
We did have an answer for that.
Oh,
so
I missed that.
We'll hear the answer.
The softer the plastic, the quicker it can degrade.
Oh yes. I see.
And thank you, C. Davidson, for that answer, that quick answer.
Yeah, I guess there's such a difference in terms of conservation with marble and then plastic man-made material that can tear artists, contemporary art can shed different problems of conservation, but I'm glad we had an answer for
Thank
that.
you. We're going to take 2 more questions. And so these are the last 2 questions. If you folks have any other more questions or comments, please leave them on when the video is going to be posted on the Instagram page. So one of the last 2 questions is, we were talking a bit about diversity of people, but someone mentioned possibly also diversity of landscape in Canada. So not just people, but spaces.
Eastern Canada and Western Canada and South, yes. I think that's a good way. And land, and we know that by Group of 7 and different topics we discussed in this tour, different tours, land can be associated with the complexities linked to identities. So I think it's an interesting link to put together.
All right, and our final question before we end the broadcast is there, from Very Bruniful, they're asking, is there any meaning to the upside down Canadian flag?
Which one?
The one that's flipped.
This one here?
Yeah, so that one's upside down.
I don't have a clear answer for that, but just hold on because my friend Laurence is.
Do you know?
Oh, see, it's one image that, like a book opened up. Is that
Yes.
Well, I mean, from what I'm seeing, I'm not saying that I have necessarily an answer that's been written, but I just see that it seems to be kind of something that was folded. So
Perhaps a card or an envelope.
yeah.
I think it goes back to a relationship to material. She can be playful with them. This is maybe like Laurence suggested, maybe it's a piece of book or something like that. We can play with those material. And to make it backward, I'm not really out of the artist, I don't want to answer for her, but it's interesting in the light of what we just discussed. Playing with symbols, playing with including different identity, maybe it refers to that things can be malleable, identity can be malleable or yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah, the playfulness, the colors, it's yeah. This is a good example of art can be linked to society and life, politics as well. So I think we're gonna end here, but since it's, well, I really want to say it's beautiful outside, it's a good time to take a walk, but maybe not, but maybe there will be a bit of light here and there, and if you want to take a walk, please remember we do have artworks outside the gallery, so we can't come in for a certain period of time, but outside we do have artworks, and if you walk around, you will see, of course, Maman by Louise Bourgeois, this big spider, almost 10 meters tall, and that's Louise Bourgeois' artwork. She created that in the early 1999, to be fair and precise. She created that in her early 80. She was 83, I think, when she did that. There you go. And it's a complex homage to her own mother. Her mother was sewing, just like the spider was doing. She was also overprotective, a little bit scary, like a spider could be. So the idea, the animal, the insect of spider is a good metaphor for the mothers. For Mother's Day, if you're around, please go look at this wonderful piece of art. And we thank you very much for being with us today. It's been a pleasure to answer your question and to show you these pieces, and we hope to see you quite soon. And happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day, everyone. Thank you for joining in. Join us next week for the flower tour.